Chapter 16. A Dangerous Crossing. Allie knew the risks of traveling on water before she climbed aboard the Staten Island ferry, but seeing the McGill's ghost ship right there in the bay made her realize she had to take a chance. If she didn't, there was no telling where that ship would go next, and no telling if she'd ever find it again. She had raced from the old pickle factory to Battery Park, and from there she could see, just as the haunter had said, the McGill's ship. She knew it was a ghost ship because it left no wake behind it as it powered forward. She knew it was the McGill's because painted in sloppy black letters beneath the words Sulphur Queen were the words Property of the McGill. The only way to reach it, though, was on another vessel. The Staten Island ferry seemed the best candidate for the job. Allie made her way to the ferry landing and pushed through the bustle of people piling on and off the boat, ignoring the thoughts that shot like bullets through her mind each time someone passed through her. All their thoughts were about the wind and the snow, which made no difference to her. She didn't let herself slow down, because she could already tell the ferry deck was as treacherous for her as the surface of a bridge. It was like walking on tissue paper. Every footfall left her ankle deep in the floor, and she had to step quickly to keep from sinking too far into the deck. The honk of a horn, and the ferry pulled away from the dock, bound for Staten Island. The way Allie figured it, the bay was large, but not all that large. Living world boats would often have to adjust their courses to avoid collision. Right now, the McGill ship was in between them and Staten Island, invisible to the ferry's pilot. With any luck, the ferry would pass right through it, delivering Allie to her destination. All around her, living folk spoke of meals and sails, inconsiderate husbands and unsatisfied wives. Small talk now seemed so small from her perspective. She wondered how people could engage in it altogether. Such pettiness filled the lives of the living. She could begin to see why Mary would have nothing to do with it. Mary. Almost reflexively, she turned to look back at the city. Through the falling snow, the buildings of the city were just a faded shadow, but the twin towers of Mary's domain were bright and bold, as if painted on the skyline, standing in proud defiance of everything Allie once thought she knew about the nature of the world. Someday, thought Allie, I will write a book too. It wouldn't be a book of rules and etiquette, but one of experience, because each day in Everlost brought a fresh experience. How Mary could think she knew so much without ever leaving the comfort of her tower was one of the greatest mysteries of Everlost. But now there were other things to deal with, like the ghost ship looming closer before her. In her excitement, Allie tried to lean against the ferry's rail, only to lean right through it. She spun her arms trying to catch her balance and nearly fell off the ferry into the bay. She saved herself by letting her knees buckle and falling backward, but that didn't turn out to be a good thing either. Her rear hit the deck and passed through it. She reached out her hands, but they went straight through the wood and the steel beneath that. She could feel the warmer air of the lower deck on her fingertips and felt herself sinking even further. As she tried to right herself, her body kept falling, and she dropped right through a row of benches on the lower deck, not as much as ruffling the pages of a man's newspaper as she fell through him. She didn't stop there. The force of her fall left her embedded in the floor of that deck. Frantically, she tried to pull herself up, but again only succeeded in sinking further. She fell through the lower passenger deck right into the auto deck, where cars sat, their engines off as they crossed the bay. Even the steel of cars didn't stop her, and now she began to panic. "Help!" she screamed. "Somebody, help me!" But, of course, there was no one to hear her cries, and she cursed herself for not thinking to make herself a pair of road shoes before attempting this crossing. She fell through the floor of the auto deck into the engine room. Gears grinded, pistons pounded, echoing all around her, and as she tried to stand up, her feet passed through the hull of the boat. She could feel the icy bay water around her ankles and then her shins, and she knew that if she didn't think of something fast, she would sink straight through the bottom of this boat. And as Mary wrote, that would be that. "Help me," she screamed again, if not to anyone in the living world, then to some force in the heavens as invisible to her as she was invisible to the living. There was a man in the engine room with her. Unkempt gray hair, 2-day beard stubble, his blue uniform told her he was part of the ferry crew. one of the ferry's pilots on break. He quietly sipped coffee, raising and lowering his eyebrows as if in some silent conversation with himself. Allie was up to her waist now, her legs dangling through the bottom of the boat into the water. That's when something occurred to her. The preppy girl at the pizza place. When Allie had surfed, that girl, she had felt like a kite lifted off the ground by the girl's thoughts. What if Allie could do that again, this time with the old man? It was a long shot, but she had to try. Slogging her way through the steel of the ship's hull took everything she was worth. The hull was thick enough to slow her descent, but also so thick that pulling herself through it took a huge effort of will. In the end, she had to resort to kicking her feet in the water below and moving her hands through the air, as if she were swimming. She was down to her belly button by the time she got near the man, who sat in his chair, oblivious to her. She could feel the cold water of the bay passing through her middle, filling the spot where her stomach had once been. Just a few more moments and I'll be gone, she thought. And so with a last bit of strength, she leaned forward, toward the man in the chair, and touched him. She felt a rush of blood, the pumping of a heart, and she became a kite, lifted into the air. Allie could no longer feel the cold of the water, and I'll never win. I have to win. I have no chance. I have every chance. Numbers, numbers. Which numbers? Lucky numbers. 425, birthday, 7, 12, 14. Ages of the grandkids, 39 years. We've been married, 18 million. And if I win the lottery, I'll never go to Staten Island again. Allie couldn't feel her feet. She couldn't feel her hands. She couldn't feel anything. And all she could hear were his thoughts. It was as if her body had suddenly ceased to exist and she was just pure spirit, cocooned within another person's being. She opened her eyes, not realizing she had even closed them, and now what she saw seemed very different from what she'd seen before. There had been a green coffee mug on the table, but now looking at it, she couldn't tell whether it was green or red. Her eyes jerked toward a red light above the engine involuntarily. Only the light wasn't red anymore, just pale white. Now she finally realized what was going on. I'm seeing through his eyes, and he's colorblind, she thought. She watched the coffee cup come up to her lips and then back down again. She could almost taste the coffee. Win, gotta win, numbers, all in the numbers. His lottery thoughts assaulted her mind, and he didn't even know she was there. The next time he brought the coffee cup to his lips, she could swear she actually tasted the brew. And then, in a few more moments, she began to feel something spectacular. She felt hot. Hot from the coffee. Hot from the heat of the engine. She could feel fingertips touching the handle of the mug, the pressing against skin, the tag of the shirt at the back of the neck. There was a numbness about it, true, as if her entire body had been shot with Novocaine, but there was no doubting that she was feeling with the nerves of living flesh once again. It was all so startling she forgot for a moment why she was there. Numbers, numbers, lucky numbers, the man's thoughts droned on. I have as good a chance as any 10 times the chances if I buy 10 tickets. And then it hit her that she had spent at least a minute here, while the ferry was still moving. She may have already missed her chance to intercept the McGill ship. She could leap out of him now, but the fear of sinking through the bottom of the hull was so great in her that she didn't dare. If only the pilot would go to the upper decks instead of just sitting here, he would carry her with him. Numbers, lucky numbers. What if I add them all together and divide by 7? Her frustration kept on building. Stop thinking about the stupid lottery and get up. And suddenly the man put down his coffee and stood. Was it a coincidence? Allie didn't know for sure. The man remained standing for a moment, then slowly settled back down in his chair, slightly bewildered. If her thoughts had made him get up, maybe she could do it again. Allie filled herself with the same frustration and determination. Stand up, she insisted. Again, the man stood. Numbers, lotteries, numbers. Why did I just stand up? Okay, thought Allie. This was something new. It was clear that the man still had no idea she was there, and he couldn't tell the difference between her thoughts and his own. Allie tried to take advantage of that. Go to the upper deck, Allie said. You always take your break down below, and you never enjoy the view. It's too hot down here anyway. I should go on the deck, the man thought. Allie felt the strange, numb sensation of fabric against skin as he rose and climbed the stairs. The cold of the auto level hit Allie suddenly. She couldn't actually feel the chill, but she could feel him feeling cold, and she realized that she had pushed him up here with such a strength of will, he had forgotten it to take his coat. "Next deck," Allie whispered. He obeyed. The first passenger deck was warm, although not as warm as the engine room. He continued climbing up to the top level, which was open to the snowy day. Now, through this man, Allie could lean against the railing without falling through it. But when Allie scanned the waters, she was shocked to see the McGill ship was no longer there. She could see nothing but the shore of a Staten Island in the distance. She panicked for a moment until understanding set in. "I'm seeing through his eyes," she reminded herself, "and he can't see the ghost ship." She stepped out of him. It was easy, like slipping out of an overcoat, and the second she did, the nature of the world changed again. The McGill ship reappeared now that she was viewing the world through her own ghostly eyes. The McGill ship was off to the right, but the ferry was moving too fast. At this rate, the ferry would pass in front of it, not coming any closer than 100 yards. Filled with a sense of fury and despair, she turned to the old ferry pilot, but he was no longer there. She found him heading toward the ferry's bridge. She hurried after him and stepped right back into the old man, stealthily. Immediately, the world she saw became his colorblind living world, as he opened the door to the bridge and went in. The ferry's bridge was small and smelled of old varnish. Another young pilot was at the controls. "Winds are killer today," said the younger ferryman. "They ought to make these things more aerodynamic." "Yeah," said the old man absently. The younger man glanced over at him for a second. "Something wrong?" Nah, he said. "It's just nothing. I don't know. Something weird." Allie knew he was sensing her. Even though she was hiding beneath the threshold of his understanding, he was feeling the hint of her presence. A plan was forming in her mind, but if he was becoming aware of her, she would have to make her move quick, or it would be too late. "Tell him to take a break, early," Allie demanded. "Take over the controls." Suddenly, Allie felt the body of the old man turn, looking around, as if searching for someone behind him. "What the... Something bite ya?" asked the younger pilot. "I'll tell ya, the bugs here don't know it's winter. They breed down in the engine room and crawl up here between the bulkheads." "Do it," Allie insisted. "Take controls of the ferry now." "But," the old man said, "no." There was a panic in his thoughts, and Allie knew she had been exposed. "Who are you? What do you want?" In her panic, she considered leaping out of him and right into the other pilot, but she had never done a person-to-person leap before. No, it was best to stay where she was and work with the old man. She calmed herself down and spoke to him through her thoughts. It doesn't matter," she told him. "All that matters is that you take the wheel and change course." "No," he said it aloud this time. The other man looked at him. No, what?" No, it wasn't a bug," he said. "At least not the kind you're talking about." The other guy didn't know what to make of it, so he just turned his attention forward. "Never mind who I am," Allie thought. "You have to take the wheel. You have to change course." But he wouldn't. That's when Allie made a calculated move. This was a battle of wills, and although she was a stranger in his skin, her sense of touch didn't seem as numb as it had before. Maybe, just maybe. Allie thrust a hand forward and found that the hand moved. It wasn't her hand, but the old pilot's. Her fingers quivered as two spirits struggled to control it. But in the end, Allie won. She wasn't just mind surfing now. She was body surfing, and could use this man's body as if it were her own. She grasped the shoulders of the younger pilot and spoke, but when her voice came out, it was the dry, raspy voice of a man who had smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day his whole life. "You can go below," Allie heard herself say in the old man's voice. "I'll finish off this run." The younger ferryman offered no argument. He nodded and left, happy for some break time. Inside her thoughts, the old pilot clawed for control of his limbs again. "Patience," Allie told him. "Patience. It will be over soon." But that only made him more terrified. Gripping on the wheel, Allie pulled to the right. Now she could not see where the McGill's ship was, but she remembered the spot where it had been. The boat began a turn that took it off its well-run course. All at once it occurred to Allie, I'm alive again. I am flesh, blood, and bone. Is this what the kid had meant when he said there were other ways to be alive again? She knew she had discovered something major here, but she couldn't deal with that right now. She held the new course for a full minute. By the time that minute had passed, the body she wore was shaking with the force of the man's spirit trying to reclaim himself, and finally she let him, because she had done what she had set out to do. The moment she stepped out of the body, the man yelped, then quickly gained control of himself. He blotted his sweating forehead, and rather than letting the shock of what had happened fill him, he instead turned his attention to the wheel, quickly pulling it back on course toward Staten Island. She did, however, hear him praying beneath his breath, whispering a series of Hail Marys. She wanted to tell him that it was okay, that this was a one-shot deal that would never happen to him again, but with the McGill ship so close, she didn't have time. Her change of course had brought them right into the path of the oncoming ghost ship. The bow of the McGill's huge vessel rammed right into the ferry's starboard side, but rather than slicing it in half, it simply passed through, as if the ferry wasn't there. Around her, the details of the ferry seemed to fade into nothing, as the Everlost reality of the ghost ship canceled it out, plowing forward. And Allie remembered what Mary had said about how hard it was to see two things occupying the same space. The bow of the McGill ship hit her, catching her solidly, and she realized she could not pass through this steel. If she didn't find something to hold on to, the McGill ship would push her out of the ferry and right into the sea. She reached for anything that she could grab onto, and finally the anchor hanging from a hole in the bow swept past. She grabbed it, held onto it, and was lifted out of the ferry's airspace. In a moment, the ferry was gone, chugging steadily toward Staten Island, and Allie was clinging for all she was worth to an anchor suspended above the churning water of New York Bay. Silently, thanking her parents for forcing her to stay in gymnastics for 4 years, she climbed the anchor chain and deftly flipped onto the deck of the ghost ship. She surprised a team of unlikely pirates who grabbed her the second she was on board. They were even more unpleasantly distorted than the altar boys. They practically carried her to the highest deck where something slouched on a gaudy throne. The thing on the throne was far from human. Ellie found it horrifying to look, yet harder to look away. It had sharp 3-fingered talons for hands, and skin as red as a lobster, and pocketed like the moon. Its mismatched eyes wandered of their own accord, and its nasty tuft of spidery hair looked like it might crawl off the creature's head at any moment. This thing was beyond grotesque, so far beyond that Allie found her fear balanced by fascination. How could something so horrible exist? What are you? She asked. She thought she said it to herself, but realized she had spoken aloud. I am the McGill, it said. Hear my name and tremble. And Allie laughed. She didn't mean to, but that line was so goofy she couldn't help herself. The McGill frowned, or at least she thought it frowned. It waved a dirty claw, and all the assembled pirates scrambled away like rats, except for the small-headed one standing beside her. I will make you suffer in ways you cannot imagine, McGill said. And although Allie believed it, she wasn't going to let this beast see her fear the way she had let the Haunter see it. If there was one thing she had learned, it was that monsters only had the power that you gave them. But she also knew that monsters didn't deal well with blatant disrespect. She had already disrespected the McGill once. She would probably not get away with it again. I've heard that you are the greatest creature in all of Everlost, she nodded respectfully. Now I see that it's true. The McGill smiled, or at least Allie thought it smiled. It turned its dangling eye toward the misproportioned boy beside it. What do you think, Pinhead? Should I throw her overboard or something worse? Worse, answered Pinhead. Somehow Allie knew he'd say that. The McGill shifted in its throne, trying to make that unsightly body more comfortable, which seemed an impossibility. But first, I want to know how you snuck on board my ship. Allie grinned. No one's ever done that before, have they? Actually, no, said Pinhead. and McGill threw him a burning gaze before turning back to Allie. "How did you do it?" demanded the McGill. "I'll tell you, but only if—" The McGill didn't let her finish. It waved a clawed hand. "Only if nothing. I don't make deals. Throw her overboard. I've lost interest in her." Pinhead moved to grab her, but she slipped out of his grasp. "No," said Allie. "Wait, I'll tell you how I got on your ship." Pinhead hesitated. She thought she might get what she wanted if she played this right, but realized that she could not play at all. The McGill did not play games, and truly intended to toss her over. The best she could do was to stall with hopes of finding some way to bargain for the lives of Nick and Leaf, assuming they hadn't already been hurled overboard themselves. "I took the Staten Island ferry," she said quickly, "and I slipped on board as it passed through your ship." Suddenly, both of the McGill's wandering eyes zeroed in on her. It gripped the edge of the throne with its claws and pushed itself up. "The ferry changed course," the McGill said, almost as if it was intentional. "Did you do that?" Allie wondered which response would keep her from being thrown overboard, yes or no. In the end, she realized her answer was really the best of both worlds. "Yes and no," she explained. Or she said. The McGill took a step closer. "Explain." "I couldn't make the ship turn myself, so I sort of leapt into the pilot's body and took over for a few seconds." The McGill maintained its hideous stare in silence. "You expect me to believe this?" it finally said. "Believe what you want, but I'm telling you the truth." The creature eyed her for a few moments more. "So, then you're telling me that you know how to usurp, possess, and control the living. You can actually skinjack." Allie didn't like the sound of that. Is that what she had done? Had she possessed the pilot? Had she skinjacked him? It sounded so criminal. I prefer to think of it as body surfing. The McGill laughed at that. Body surfing. Very good. It scratched thoughtfully for a moment at the stalk of its smaller, dangling eye. "What's your name?" "Allie," she answered. "Allie the Outcast." The McGill, not at all impressed by her title, dug a single claw into its oversized nose, pulled out a booger the size of a roach, and flicked it to the wall where it stuck. Allie grimaced. "Take her below," the McGill told Pinhead. "Shall I chime her with the others?" "No," the McGill said. "Put her in the guest quarters." Pinhead nodded obediently and took Allie's arm with slightly more respect than he might have a moment ago. Allie, however, sensing her bargaining position had now changed, shrugged Pinhead off. "You took 2 of my friends from the Haunter." The McGill became very attentive. "Friends?" the monster said slowly. "Are they here?" "Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. For now, you will go to your quarters. When I want you, I'll call for you." She sighed, knowing she couldn't push it any further. "Thank you for being so merciful," she said. "But I would appreciate it if P-Brain here would keep his hands off me." "That's Pinhead," corrected the boy. "P-Brain works in the engine room." The McGill waved a hand in dismissal. Pinhead bowed to Allie in a mock gesture of courtesy, and she was led to the guest quarters with more dignity than any afterlight had experienced on the Sulphur Queen since its crossing into Everlost. Once the girl was gone, the McGill lumbered back to his throne and sat down. From the little perch where the throne sat, he had view of the ocean before him. They had crossed beneath the Verrazano Bridge, and the Sulphur Queen would soon be out in the Atlantic, on its endless journey up and down the eastern seaboard. The McGill rarely allowed himself flight of fancy. He kept his existence pessimistic, always expecting the negative, and reveling when the worst didn't come to pass. But this girl had struck a chord in him. Skinjacking. That was a power more useful than any of the powers he already possessed. To be able to leap from one body to another at will, intruding into the living world, then finding new flesh to inhabit whenever it suited him. How powerful that would make him. Could this girl teach him to do that? If so, it would be worth putting all of his other plans on hold. Yes, this new associate offered some exciting possibilities. And here's a little excerpt at the end of the chapter. The closest Mary Hightower comes to mentioning the McGill is in her book, Caution, This Means You. Between paragraphs on the dangers of gravitational vortexes and reality television, Mary writes, if you find a dead spot containing something of great value, like jewelry, food that has crossed over, or any other object that seems too good to be true, chances are that it is too good to be true. Stay away from these places, or you may find yourself in a very unpleasant circumstance. It is commonly believed that she is referring to the McGill's green soul traps, which are rumored to be strategically placed up and down the east coast. Of course, their existence has never been proven.